What's going on, YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and today we are taking a look at the Washington Capitals as their season has kind of come to a point now where this is make or break for the Caps, right? They're just on the fringes of a playoff spot. They're in, they're out on any given night, but their current three-game losing streak, does this mean the end for the Caps, or do they still have a chance? We're going to probably find out a lot more this weekend whether the Caps have a chance or not, but we're going to discuss that in today's video. If you guys like what we're doing here at Goal Line Hockey, want to see the latest news around the NHL, including the Washington Capitals, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. So, with that out of the way, let's take a look at the Capitals. So the Capitals have had the type of season that you're kind of expecting in terms of, there was a real possibility that this team wouldn't make the playoffs. I apologize, guys. I'm pulling it up now, the window for what we're looking for. There we go. Yeah, so the Capitals season has been, kind of what you would expect, right? So 36, 29, and 10, 82 points, fifth in the Metropolitan Division standings. But I think what's making this more difficult for Caps fans is the fact that they have a legitimate chance at making the playoffs this season. And, maybe earlier this year, maybe in January, it was like, all right, like realistically, we're not making the playoffs. Ovechkin's having a down year. Maybe this is a regression. And then they started getting a couple of injuries earlier this year, and you were thinking, all right, this is probably it for the Caps. But they actually turned out to be playing better with some of the younger guys coming up from Hershey and making a real impact on the team. And then we started to see, really in the past week, a couple of guys getting cleared coming back to the Caps, right? Sonny Milano coming back to the lineup, Rasmus Sandin, TJ Oshie. Some of those guys were brought off of IR last week, and you would think, great, this means the Caps are going to continue to turn the train forward, and it didn't work, as some of those guys have come back to the lineup, and they've actually played worse, which sometimes happens. So talking about the Capitals, right, what's been happening here? We got to go back to that Toronto Maple Leafs game. That seems to be one of the teams that the Caps really struggle against. And you look at their record and their schedule recently, that is the game to look at. And unfortunately, since that game, they are now on a losing streak. And in fact, a 4-game losing streak now, which started against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, here's the good thing out of this whole situation. The last win they had was against the Detroit Red Wings, who are also right in the chase of a playoff spot. So in the past 5 games, that is their most important game because that's a 4-point game. Now, you could argue that the Pittsburgh game was too, because you beat Pittsburgh. You're probably taking Pittsburgh out of a playoff. They're probably very close to being eliminated last night if the Capitals win that game in regulation. But that didn't happen. The Caps lose the game in regulation, so that's 2 points for Pittsburgh. That's 2 points that don't go in the bank for the Caps. And just like that, what could have been a 4-point swing, right? So it's either 2 more points for the Caps, 2 less points for the Penguins, or what we saw, which is no points for the Caps and 2 points for the Penguins, which keeps them in the race and fighting and clawing at the Washington Capitals and a couple of other teams in the Eastern Conference. So, it's one of those things where right now the Capitals are out of a playoff spot, and we're going to look at that here. Looking at the NHL standings in the Metropolitan Division, this has kind of been a weird situation. Somehow it's still turned out the way that it kind of looked for the last couple of weeks, right? For a minute, the Capitals were 3rd in the division and looking like they would likely be playing Carolina. And just like that, within a day or two, now they find themselves out of the playoffs. That's just how tight that race is between 3rd in the Metropolitan Division, likely playing the Carolina Hurricanes, or just completely missing the playoffs. And that's what's crazy about this whole situation. Now, here's the good news for the Caps. Out of the 2 other teams that they're truly chasing in the Metropolitan Division, because let's be honest, the math isn't adding up so great for Pittsburgh and Buffalo. Really, Pittsburgh is still in the fight, as stupid as that is, and I had them out for dead. Well, Sidney Crosby continues to do what he's doing, and the Penguins are still in the chase. So, theoretically, you've got 4 teams in the Metropolitan Division fighting for, theoretically, 2 spots, and then you have the Detroit Red Wings, who are still kind of in the mix as well. Now, a really important thing to look at here, guys, is this row right here. No, that's not what I meant. Whoops, my bad. And I'm purposely highlighting the Islanders, not because that's my favorite team, but regulation wins is the tiebreaker. So if the season were to end today, and that's why you're seeing, well, why are the Flyers ahead of the Islanders, right? Head to head, the Islanders have beaten the Flyers more and everything else. Regulation wins is the most important stat. And that is right there, row. You see row? 32, 33. Ooh. Okay, so first is regulation wins, then it goes to first it's wins, and then it's regulation wins. I apologize, guys. So this is the first metric. The first metric is wins. Who has the most wins, right? So the Flyers get in with 2 more wins than the Islanders, and they have played the same amount of games. The Capitals have played 1 less game than the Flyers, who they're 1 point back of, and they have the same amount of wins. And then, of course, you get to row, which is this one right here, right? I keep going to the Hurricanes. Flyers have 32 regulation wins. The Islanders technically have 33, and the Caps have 32. So those are the 2 main stats. Wins in general, and then row, which is regulation and overtime wins, right? So that's really important to look at. And for the Capitals right now, to say they're dead is ridiculous, because if they're able to win some of their next couple games, we forget about this conversation next week, and I look silly. But the important thing to look at is the remainder of their schedule, which is going to make things way more difficult. So the first game on tap, they got to head down to Carolina on Friday night to take on the Carolina Hurricanes in Raleigh. Then they head home to take on Ottawa. Yeah, you know what? Standing-wise, they look like an easy opponent. They've actually been playing really well, and they've been playing spoiler as they really have nothing to lose. The Senators are a tough team to watch, and they better watch Brady Tkachuk because he has been on a heater. Then you have another big game against the Red Wings. We talked about this in my last Capitals video. Those 2 games against the Red Wings here down the stretch, right? That game we talked about here earlier, a 4-3 overtime win, which, yes, it's a win, but you still gave the Red Wings a point. Really kind of wishing you won that game in regulation, right? And then, of course, this one right here, which is going to be next, I believe, Tuesday or Wednesday in Detroit. So really the Capitals need to win that game. Then you've got Buffalo, who they should beat as well. You should beat the Buffalo Sabres. But again, should and will are different things. And that's kind of a similar situation with the Senators, right? They should win that game. But you know what? Those teams are playing with house money. They have nothing to lose. They're putting rookies into the lineup that have nothing, right? All they have is to gain. So these 2 games in particular are really scary games because those should be wins for the Capitals. Those are 4 easy points, but they have to be in the right mindset that they have to show up for those games, because if they don't show up, they will lose those games, right? And then I would argue probably their biggest game of the season, if it comes to this, is April 16th in Philadelphia against the Flyers and taking on John Tortorella's Philadelphia Flyers, because that could end up being the game that decides it all in the Eastern Conference. Again, a lot of hockey to play still here in the next week or so, but that might be the game that separates the playoffs and the non-playoffs in the Eastern Conference in Philadelphia on April 16th. Now, with that all said, where do the Caps truly stand here? I think it's great to see Ovechkin continue scoring goals. That's been a big thing for the Caps. A thing they really need to work on, and I've been watching their last couple games and the highlights. I haven't watched the full games, but I have been watching their highlights, and something that's a concern for me is the Caps in most of those games have been giving up the first goal. You can't continue to give up those early goals because it takes all the wind out of the sails, especially on a homestand, right? You would think that would be a reason to gain momentum, get the crowd into it, get that first goal at home, and get the game going. They haven't been doing that. They've been trailing most of their games, and I think other than one, they've been trailing their games at home, and they've been losing those games. And I think that Capitals fans kind of have that level of, like, uneasiness, right? Because they're like, oh, here we go. We gave up the first goal again. You can't do that, right? And the way they've been losing, some of these games have been brutal. 6-2 loss to the Sabres, 4-1 loss to your big rival up in Pittsburgh, right? You can't lose those games like that. And as much as the goaltending hasn't been great, yeah, that's been a part of it. The defense needs to get a little bit better, and they need to score that first goal, especially these games at home. This is a great chance for the Capitals. During the last couple weeks, they've had a nice home stretch, and then we thought, well, let's see how they play on the road, right? They had that West Coast road trip. They played phenomenal, beating Winnipeg, Vancouver, Calgary. Well, Calgary is Calgary, but they still won those games. And then they come home and lay a couple goose eggs. You can't have that happening. You just can't afford to have that right now at this point in the season. And for the Capitals, I believe they will make the playoffs. I still do. I might be dying on that sword as I look like an idiot, but I think the Capitals have what it takes. They're the hottest team out of anybody in this group, right? The Red Wings turned it on a little bit, but the Capitals have been more consistent overall. The Flyers have totally been in a tailspin, right? Those tires have been spinning and not moving much over the last couple of weeks. John Tortorella's even scratched their captain, Sean Couturier. They've been doing anything possible to get that team going. The Islanders, well, the Islanders, but you know what? They're currently on a 3-game winning streak, which keeps them right in the race with the Capitals. So all that ground the Capitals had after that Western Canadian road trip absolutely means nothing now because teams have caught up. Teams have evened the schedule, right? Teams have evened the playing field out. Now it's time for the Capitals to get things going. We need to see Dylan Strome continue to score goals. He's been doing that a little bit. Need to see a little bit more from that, right? The defense kind of jumping up and creating some offense. That's going to be critical, right? We saw a goal from John Carlson the other day. Nick Jensen got a really nice assist against the Red Wings. Those are the type of things you need to see here down the stretch if the Caps want to win. And like I always say in all these videos, goaltending. You need Darcy Kuemper and Charlie Lindgren to be on their A game. And if that can happen, the Capitals can get to the playoffs. Now, a lot of people will argue, all these teams in these eastern spots, they're looking down the road, they're looking at if they make the wild card. They're looking at if they make the wild card, or specifically in the Metro, if you get that third seed in the Metro, you're taking on either Carolina or the Rangers. That doesn't sound like a fun matchup to anybody right now. The Flyers, the Islanders, the Penguins probably, and the Washington Capitals. None of those 4 teams are probably thrilled at the prospect of playing that group because those 2 teams in the Metro, they're number 1 and 2 seed in the Metro for a reason. The Carolina Hurricanes, I don't think they've had a losing streak in 2024 yet, and the Rangers are looking like they could win the President's Trophy right now as they currently sit atop the NHL standings. So I don't think anybody's breaking down the door to play the Rangers either, right? So it's one of those things where the Capitals, things are going to play out if it's meant to be. But so many of these teams have kind of been backing their way in and out of a playoff spot. Now is crunch time. Now is that veteran leadership. The guys from the 2018 Cup for the Caps, if they're going to make the playoffs, they need those guys to do their thing. Tom Wilson, Oshie, Ovechkin, all those guys, Carlson, guys like Nick Jensen, veterans, right? You need those guys to do what they do. And I think the Capitals have a shot. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Do you think this is it for the Capitals, or do you think they still have a chance? Like I said, the 2 big games to watch here between now and April 16th. That game up in Detroit next Tuesday or Wednesday, and then that final game of the season against the Flyers. I think those are the 2 game breakers for this team. They have a couple of other tough games in that stretch. They play, I believe, Boston. They play Tampa. So this is no cupcakes. This is no cupcake schedule, but if they're going to make the playoffs, the Capitals are going to have to earn it. So guys, that's going to do it for today. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you again next time. Peace out, guys.